Good afternoon. Welcome to the campaign online briefing, Out of Home 2021. I'm Austyn Allison, the editor of Campaign Middle East. It's really good to see so many of you have come in for this webinar. There's, as I say, there's some familiar faces and there's some unfamiliar ones. So that's really good, and we're still, more and more people are joining. Thanks for joining us. It's going to be a really interesting session, I know, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot out of it. I have a bit of a soft spot for out of home. I find it like a generally really interesting, diverse topic. This is our fourth webinar, and it's the last online briefing for the year, but we've still got some exciting stuff coming up. So keep watching campaignmiddleeast.com, subscribe to our newsletters there, and follow us on our social channels. You can also find our new podcast, On the Record with Campaign Middle East, on Angami. So do go over to Angami, search for On the Record with Campaign Middle East, and you'll find some pretty interesting discussions there. We're also working on our multi-speaker Marcoms 360 Predictions 2021 event. So get in touch if you're interested in coming on board as a partner. As far as predictions go, last year was a bit of a low point. I don't think anybody got it right, so we could only be more accurate from that one. Make sure, even if you're not partnering with us on that, make sure that you do join us on the 14th and 15th of December. We've got a lot of industry experts giving their short, sharp, snappy predictions. I think, Fadi, you're one of them, aren't you? You're going to be, yeah, there's some really interesting stuff there. So make sure you're there, 14th and 15th of December. There's also just time to get your entries in for our Marketing Faces to Watch. This is a celebration of young talent aged 30 and under on the client side. So if you have an amazing young client-side colleague, or if you're at an agency and your client's a rising superstar, get over to campaignme.com, fill out the form. It's free, but entries do close this week and we can't extend them. So we've got a fair number of entries there that are looking for the best young talent there. So get your colleagues, friends, clients. Good way to score branding points with your clients if you're an agency. This webinar couldn't happen without our official partner, who is Arabian Outdoor. Arabian Outdoor is part of Shweri Group, who've been long-time supporters and partners of Campaign. Arabian Outdoor is the official out-of-home arm of Shweri Group, which has served as a pioneering and market-leading force in the UAE's outdoor advertising market since 1995. As well as being on Zoom, we are live streaming on our Facebook page. So there shouldn't be any problem getting into Zoom, but if any of your friends are having trouble getting in, realize they haven't registered, anything like that, tell them to find Campaign Middle East over on Facebook and they can watch the same session from there. If you want to revisit the session as well, it's going to be on our Facebook page immediately afterwards. So you can go and have a good look and catch up on the bits that you missed. There's a chat feature on Zoom, obviously, to talk to one another, to heckle, to pass rude notes to each other. But if you want to submit a question for the end, please use the question and answer, the Q&A box at the bottom. That just sort of helps keep things in one place. I'll be putting the questions and answers to the panel. We've got a really good panel I'm about to introduce, so I totally take advantage of these guys and ask them anything, put them on the spot. They're happy to take queries. So today we're going to be looking at out-of-home advertising. It's the world's oldest advertising format, and it's also one of the most resilient and effective. But it was hit hard by COVID-19. Out-of-home was out-of-home while most of us were working from home for a considerable part of it. While that was a big problem during the time the world was in lockdown, advertisers were fast to adapt, and we'll see how the COVID experience has changed, how brands are using billboards, lampposts, digital signages, and all the other components that make up the outdoor and wider out-of-home advertising mix. So let me introduce you to my panel. I'm joined by Fadi Maktabi, who is the Managing Director of Hearts and Science. Hi, Fadi.
Hey, everyone.
I'm joined by Siddharth Sivaprakash, who is the Head of Marketing for Home Centre, which in turn is part of Landmark Group. Hi, Sid.
Hey, Austyn. Hey, everyone.
And I'm joined by Josiane Assad, who is the Senior Marketing Director of Talabat. Hi, Josiane.
Austyn, hi, everyone.
So both Home Centre and Talabat have been using outdoor to communicate during COVID times, as have, and Fadi gives a really good sort of overview of the sort of wider client mix. So we can all really hope to learn from the sort of shared experiences that we got on this panel. I'm going to start us off by asking a pretty obvious question, but let's get to it straight away. Josiane, what would you say have been the primary challenges to out of home this year?
It was a very easy year, that's for sure.
Yeah, no problems.
If we are, let's say, to summarize it in few points, it's definitely the unpredictability of 2020, especially when you are planning in terms of media buying and planning. We had a lot of lockdowns, whether in UAE or in other countries, which means that you had to adapt quickly and sometimes within less than 24 to 48 hours. Also, as the commuters were transitioning to more work from home, whether fully or in hybrid mode, that meant that we had less commuters, less eyeballs, and that by default impacts your return on ad spend, and also how you can measure or how you can track the impact of out of home, which meant that at every interaction with the commuters, it needs to really count. Also, it meant that we had to change a lot of the creative so that it resonates better with the changing dynamics of the whole COVID situation. And recently, as the markets are opening up, we are seeing a lot of competition when it comes to outdoor buying and planning. Sid,
what sort of challenges have you had? I'm assuming that you faced many of the same ones. Any other ones that you'd like to add to Josiane's mix?
So, well, as you mentioned, Austyn, Josiane, I think, covered a lot of the practical challenges on outdoor during the COVID period. Obviously, lesser eyeballs. But I think, in general, something that we've been struggling with over the last few years is really justifying the costs on outdoor for certain aspects of out-of-home media, just because of still very nascent information on measurability and how we can track ROAS or effectiveness. So there's very low information on attribution models. So that's been a bit of a challenge. I think it continues to be a challenge. There are some green shoots in certain areas, but
and Fadi, you're you've got a sort of a broader view, having numerous clients and being part of both at Hearts and Science and in your sort of overall, and in the sort of wider sphere of OMG. What challenges have you found that the sort of wider clients have faced, and perhaps you as an agency?
When we think of it, we started off the year and we had the usual challenges that we had with outdoor, right? And that goes into measurability primarily, and really justifying the level of spend required and the performance of the actual media, which I think over the last couple of years, we've started to see some cool things come on board when it comes to how you justify ROI. And innovation. I think that was something, with or without the pandemic, was always a challenge for the media itself, right? We talk a lot about digital screens, and we talk about the dream of having programmatic outdoor, which I think without the pandemic, maybe we would have seen a little bit more of this year. But then I think the challenges that were amplified with the pandemic itself is really about the supply-demand management. I think the pandemic exposed a lot of not so nice to have locations, if I could say it that way. It also highlighted the nice to have locations, right? So things like lampposts on Sheikh Zayed will always be valuable, and with and without lockdown, they remain to be valuable. And I echo what both Sid and Josiane said. It really is about agility, and just that was the main challenge for us to manage, right? Is that turning on and turning off consistently with lockdowns, and obviously when you amplify that across markets, it makes it even more challenging. So,
can you really, for a full, let's say, for a series of lampposts on Sheikh Zayed Road, for a billboard, I can see how Josiane was saying that you have to redo creatives maybe within 24 hours. I can see how that's possible with maybe digital screens and things. Can you really redo creative for actual sort of printed stuff? How fast can you do that? What's the record that you've seen for that, Fadi?
I think in terms of adapting the creative itself, you require the same kind of speed in adapting it. And I think this is where you get a very different implementation sort of speed, depending on two things: the market maturity and the level of partnership and professionalism on the media vendor side, right? So, I mean, we work with a big QSR, across the region. We have launched campaigns literally in one day, on outdoor. I'm not saying that we've done that during the pandemic, but we've done it before, with specific promotions or visual changes. So again, I'd say it really depends on the professionalism coming from that media vendor itself.
It's interesting. You mentioned markets, actually. You mentioned that things vary across markets. I'd like to ask what the sort of, whether the strengths of out of home vary from different markets. I'd imagine that we're all of us based in Dubai, but a lot of you guys have, you're looking at other markets. I know that Talabat works right across the region from Kuwait to Iraq to Egypt and so on. Fadi, you deal with that. Sid, do you work outside Dubai, or are you largely UAE?
Across 6 markets.
Yeah. So
the GCC in Egypt.
Yeah. So how do the sort of strengths of out of home the same across those markets, or does it vary? I think I'm going to go quickly to Fadi. Sort of what are the strengths? What are the cross market strengths? What are the strengths that are the same in every market? And then I'll go to Josean and Sid to ask them about the sort of specific market strengths and weaknesses.
I mean, to start off with, I'd say the most mature markets are the ones that are the most regulated, right? So you look at the GCC, you see, specific formats have government approval, or they're placed in specific strategic locations. You go to Egypt and you battle with clutter, right? And you end up battling with clutter, and in some cases, quality, So I think that's one of the biggest things that you see across markets. The second is, again, the more mature the market, the more systemized things are. In specific markets, they install on Sundays, and in other markets, they install on Mondays. But then again, you venture into other markets outside. You can go as far as Morocco, Lebanon, Jordan, and then it's a little bit, it's like gung ho. You need to try to figure out, how far you can push relationships.
Back in the day, I once spoke to an outdoor a brand in that was working in Libya. And they said, this was before Muammar Gaddafi fell, they said that they'd go to inspect where they'd put up a billboard the week before, and they'd find that it had been replaced by a picture of the country's ruler overnight, because, the general with the sunglasses had decided he needed to be there. Definitely a bit of a change from the sort of tightly regulated GCC countries. Josean, you've got, how many markets are you in?
8.
8. Okay, so that's quite a. And is that including the new ones that you've announced, like Iraq, or are you? Yeah. So how are you finding? What are you finding the sort of strengths and weaknesses across markets for your out of home?
So similar to what Fadi said, which is definitely depends on the market maturity, and what we see, it depends also on the market penetration, your market share, and how does that translate to outdoor. Outdoor is definitely a very powerful tool when it comes to growth markets, or to markets that are still, they still have some way to go in terms of transitioning from offline to online experience. Also transitioning to an e-commerce or gain, from a consumer point of view, gain the habit of e-commerce. So it's definitely a powerful tool in countries like Egypt, like Jordan. Also in UAE, which is already quite a competitive market. You also see a lot of outdoor players, which also becomes an expensive market, which is, it has its own strength. It also has its own challenges. And you have other markets where outdoor is good to complement your media mix, but might not be as powerful tool, just because you already have high top of mind awareness and high market penetration.
Do you find the same, Sid? Do you, one of the interesting things that Josean was talking about was cost. Do you find, what differences does the cost of outdoor make across markets?
So that's quite disparate, Austyn. We see that UAE and Dubai in general is, considerably higher. I think our largest market in terms of geography would be Saudi Arabia, and outdoor in Saudi Arabia, the dynamic's a little different. We do a lot of digital LED screens. across Saudi. We've got over 30 stores spread across Saudi, across all the different regions. So there are some really remote towns and cities that we exist in as well. So outdoor is definitely a medium that helps in a lot of the remote areas as well. But the way I would look at this is, I think we follow pretty much a two-pronged approach when it comes to out-of-home media for Home Center. The smaller formats that are used for more of a tactical purpose. So if you're talking lampposts, bridge banners, megacoms, mupis, that kind of thing, they work really well for us from a tactical point of view. They shorter bursts, higher frequency, in and out. And I think that works quite effectively across all markets. In fact, even in the UAE, we see Northern Emirates, a lot of the Northern Emirates stores get a lot of impetus from tactical initiatives like that, as opposed to just digital, in terms of spreading awareness. But when it comes to some of the major cities, our flagship stores, we do look at larger formats, and that's primarily from a brand point of view. I think it also helps with showing a bit of resilience, just in terms of the fact that, we're over a 25-year-old brand. We're here, even when the chips were down, we did have some level of presence across some of our markets. I think sort of really just keeping customer confidence alive in the brand, saying, we're here for you. And I think some of the larger outdoor formats with longer durations really help with that.
What about location of those things in relation to how tactical is that? I'm thinking especially when it comes to your smaller things, the lampposts and so on, and the more sort of the stuff that has more of a call to action. Do you tend to do that near to people's homes, near to stores, where there are stores, where there aren't stores? And did that change in fact, I'm going to compare your two answers, because I think you might have slightly different answers here, but I'll go to you first, Sid. How do you yeah.
So yes, absolutely. When it comes to the smaller formats and tactical, an approach we have is usually winning at every store level across our markets. So there are certain catchments. We do quite a bit of a detailed catchment analysis on which catchments each store really services. And based on trends that we're seeing, based on footfall, based on competition within that landscape, we really pick locations based on that. So it is definitely catchment specific most of the time.
Josiane, you're not so much a sort of catchment area per se, because you don't have stores, you're a delivery service. So where do you focus your advertising?
So before COVID, definitely we had more the bigger its attractiveness. But now, as we are transitioning to work from home, we also need to follow where the consumers are spending the majority of their time. So for us, that meant for us to focus much more on residential areas or close to community areas. We had that focus before, but now with our also multi-vertical focus in terms of grocery and not just food, this meant that we had to go closer to the areas and also actually relate them for that type of cuisine or that type of versus. So we did not just go for location purely, we also localize on an area level to make sure that we are having much more relevance in terms of messaging and in terms of the areas we are targeting, and be able to connect the dots.
Fadi, you could address that, but I'm also going to ask you how messaging has maybe changed throughout the sort of as COVID has evolved. So
first of all, I wanted to sort of also tackle a little bit of that first question, right? Which is, the power of proximity and the power of the high frequency, smaller formats. And I think this is where the pandemic highlighted businesses that were already set up with a specific kind of thinking, which is if you're able to bring in the level of data on a store level or a regional level, and then use the messaging around that store, the outdoor around that store to drive in more footfall, is more or less what people used to do. But as things have moved more onto e-commerce and digital, is look at your markets, draw heat maps of where you're not seeing a lot of digital activity onto a specific store level, and start to amplify that with that sort of smaller proximity.
That sounds like almost the opposite. That that you would be going for before. You'd be going for where the heat map is highest, and now you're going to where the heat map is lowest because of the
Exactly.
because of the sort of ubiquitousness and democratization of digital and online shopping.
Exactly, because you're no longer relying only on driving footfall, right? So before you used to buy all the locations around your store and sort of guide people in. Now you just want to boost that e-commerce level, and that's just going to have to depend on how far you're able to deliver, which for most Dubai-based companies is more or less the entire UAE.
I'll come back to you in a minute, but I'll quickly go to Sid, because this sounds like something that you're probably. You're a 25. Did you say you're a 25-year-old company? So I'd imagine that your e-commerce strategy has changed a little bit since the mid '90s.
Yes, it has.
So is this? Are you seeing this change? Are you seeing a move? I know that you said that you were looking at sort of seeing where your traction comes from the stores, but are you seeing that change over time as you move more to e-commerce, or are you still largely looking to drive footfall?
So we're an omni-channel brand, which means we are looking to drive footfall to the stores as well as obviously sessions onto the website. Also, the other sort of silver lining from this COVID period, I think, is COVID's acted as digital transformation CTO for most of the brands. We've had our online traction, to the business go up from about 13 to 14% to about 20%, and then it's sort of stabilized and plateaued in the last month or two. But to Fadi's point, I think the way we look at it is it's not just buying all the slots around stores where we were highest, but I think it's also about where competition is. I think today in retail, it's very important to be visible where your competitors are. So location is very, very strategic in terms of not just where you are, but where you're not. And of course, the call to action then is, both online and offline, so that a customer has an option.
So, Fadi, talk me through the evolution of out of home during COVID. What happened?
So I mean, if you think about it, nobody was prepared for the level of lockdowns that sort of came in and that trickled in across markets. I know Kuwait was one of the first, but then we saw that happen in most of the GCC. First of all, you have phase 0, which is complete and utter panic. And I think that's where most clients reach out to the agencies or media vendors and asking them to just, stop their booking orders or remove the visuals that we're on, etc. Very quickly, I think we moved into phase 1 as some of the lockdowns started to ease. And I remember these days of, when you applied for a permit to go to a supermarket and you tend to ask for a permit that's like 10, 15 kilometers away from your house just because you wanted to go for a little drive. And that phase, I think, was really about fixing the messaging that was on most of the outdoor across most markets. And that messaging was really about businesses showing how they're transforming their business. So if they were a purely brick and mortar business that had 2-3 weeks to start to sort of shift that business model to e-commerce, they were communicating that. If they were F&B, they were communicating things that matter to consumers, such as contactless or order online. And then I'd say after that, we moved into sort of a phase 2 where we saw a lot of brands trying to, some of them being sort of opportunistic and trying to pull heartstrings on these messages of we're all in this together and that sense of community. And obviously some brands got that right without coming off very opportunistic. And finally, I'd say it's phase 3, which is this never normal phase that we're all in. And I think this is where we really start to see the power of outdoor coming back, because people want to be out and people want to live a normal life as much as possible. But what I ask everyone to do is look at the outdoor now and the kind of messaging that's on that outdoor. A lot of it is to drive to e-commerce, and a lot of it is presenting business cases of value to customers. right? Whether be it on things of hygiene or about the ease of ordering, or specific measures they've taken to sort of protect the customer by transforming their business. And I think that's where we are more or less right now.
Sid, did you tug at the heartstrings? Did you, or did you? What did you? How much did your experience sort of fall in line with Fadi's sort of overview?
So I don't think we really tugged at the heartstrings as much as we were empathetic to what obviously everyone around us was going through, ourselves included. It's quite sort of, it's almost providence being in the home category at a time like this, where pretty much the whole world was relegated to being stuck at home without much of an option for a while at least. And I think that's that proved to put a lot of demand on the category. We were just busy trying to be as agile as possible, reacting to customer needs and demands. For a lot of people who've never ever really worked from home, or a lot of children who've never really been schooled from home, there was quite a bit of turning things upside down at home. You had to find a quiet spot. I mean, if I just go back to what happened, my wife and I were both working from home, and we had to find different rooms because otherwise we could be heard on each other's calls. So I think it was just really helping people, bringing solutions to them as soon as possible in terms of how they could set up smaller workspaces at home, make it more comfortable, make it more practical, help parents with kids, get them set up.
So you had a real sort of practical thing. Josiane, were you? I mean, you again are maybe the sort of heartstring tugging came from some of the brands that were not hardest hit, but that suddenly didn't have such a role. I'm thinking maybe automotive would have been hard hit, travel, obviously, some of the other categories that took a major hit. You again would have been much more sort of practical. Did you have did you have much emotional messaging, or were you like Sid? Did you sort of focus more on the practical and helping people? I mean, obviously helping people and commiserating with them and things, but in a sort of more practical way. How did that work out for you?
So we're an online company, and COVID, so Talabat was an enabler during COVID lockdowns where people had to order their grocery via online platforms. So it definitely helped. In some instances, it accelerated the adoption of new user behavior for those users that never tried e-commerce before. It definitely at first, so for us, for Talabat, we had a big major campaign going 360. We just finished our rebrand, we had a visual rebrand, we also had a new interface, and our big 360 regional campaign was supposed to go live 2 days from when lockdown started. And
great timing.
So besides like the whole operational element of canceling the media, in some countries we were not able to cancel, so they eventually ended up going live. There's also the element of what messaging you go. We also have our delivery arm where we're a last mile company as well. So that meant that we also had to factor in the safety of our riders, the safety of our restaurants, and also the hygiene element, and also communicate that to our consumers to also ease down the whole concerns that they had. So a lot of it was also not pure, it was more of it, not just transactional or emotion, it was more of creating that safety, communicating what we are doing, what the measures we're taking, whether from contactless to paying through credit card or not paying through cash, to all the measures we're taking with the rider safety, with the restaurants, etc. So there was a lot of that educational content at start. And later on, we went into more of a normalization, where by the time we launched our offline, we were already focusing more on the USPs of Talabat. We were creating that balance between a brand positioning as well as the USPs of ordering via Talabat, but can add to the consumer.
Fadi, I'm going to go back to you actually, because Josiane mentioned, and I think this is something that you can definitely give us an overview on. Josiane mentioned that there were challenges with sort of cancelling and changing the campaigns. You've got a pretty wide overview of the market. How how much of that was going on and how easy was it to do that? How flexible were suppliers, were agencies, were clients? How did that sort of dynamic work?
Yeah, I think, Austyn, you and I talked about this quite a bit before.
Absolutely.
How the pandemic, I think the pandemic really highlighted the power of partnership and who really had that sort of level of partnership mentality, whether it be before or during or after. So, canceling media is never a fun thing. Nobody likes to see a deal fall apart. But obviously, given the force majeure of the pandemic, it goes back to the same thing. The more mature markets have more professional media vendors in it, and they do have that partnership mentality going on. And the less mature markets, not to name any in specific, but the less mature markets, you tend to find very well, for lack of a better word, opportunistic media vendors that say, oh no, you sent the booking order, you're going to have to exhaust it, whether you use it or not, I'm keeping the money, this is a legal thing.
Surely some of that, though, is just down to cash flow, that you've got, in some of the less mature markets, you've got a lot of smaller players who can't afford to take that hit as much. Or do you think, or is it,
I think it's a mix of
attitudinal, how much is, yeah.
I think it's a mix of two things. It's definitely a cash flow thing, and it's also it goes back to highlighting the true value of good location when it comes to outdoor, right? So it goes back to the nice to have and the you should have. Some smaller partners have locations that they live off of, and they might not be the most premium, but they do well when situations are normal. And then you have some partners that have the premium of the locations that will do well regardless of the situation. But it's not just about that part of sort of the decision making. It's actually the decision making of saying, whether talking to an agency or to a client, is to say, hey, I hear that we're all in this together. We understand that you would like to cancel this booking. How about we put it on hold and utilize it later on in the year? Or how about it was meant to go on for a month, let's keep it for a week, because that's going to actually cost me work to get done. That kind of sort of partnership conversation, I think, is very refreshing to hear. But it's more towards the more hardline conversations of saying, nope, not our problem. We know you're suffering, but we're suffering too. So let's keep it as is, and it really just highlights that level of partnership across different parties.
I'm going to carry on with partnership actually, and ask how you sort of managed your partnerships during, especially sort of during COVID, when a lot of things were changing, media, creative, and things. Because I think we've got two different approaches here. Sid, you've got a lot of different partners and agencies, and Josiane, you've done a lot of stuff sort of in-house traditionally. So how did you find? I'll go to you first, Josiane. How are your sort of negotiations with your partners, and how's that sort of changing? What lessons have you learned from that?
So we do have a media agency which is regional. We do have a creative agency which is completely internal. So a lot of the creative adaptation, a lot of the turnout, also understanding what needs to be done for legal approval, etc., was done all in-house. But
was that an advantage or a disadvantage? I'm going to ask.
I think with all the timelines and all the deadlines and everything, it does create a lot of pressure to the team. It does help in terms of agility, moving fast, but sometimes also you need a third party, or you need someone to help consult and to support as well, especially with very short timelines and the ability to change and go quickly to market. But in terms of our media agency, we're working very closely, and I think this really helped us in terms of renegotiating a lot of the deals, whether to cancel last minute or to change the media booking. And they were also, especially like what Fadi mentioned earlier, in some markets that are not as regulated, such as Egypt, it's harder for you to be able to do all. You need a good media agency on your side to support you and to do all the buying and negotiation. And also, once the market starts opening, this is what you need, also a very strong agency to support you with the renegotiation on when to go back live, what to do, how can that be favorable terms for your own campaign, especially that the attribution of offline is always harder to measure. And as the markets were opening up, there was this risk element of when is a good time to go back and start your offline campaigns.
Sid, you've got, you're almost, I'm going to play it as the other end of the spectrum. You're not right at the other end of the spectrum, but you've got, you work with a couple of agencies, you're not, whereas Josiane has more or less a media agency and then a lot of in-house stuff. You've got a lot more partners. How much did that help you? How much was that a disadvantage, especially with out of home? I mean, I know there's a sort of wider story here, but in terms of sort of out of home, in terms of negotiating, in terms of redoing all those campaigns, in terms of changing things around, was it good? Was it bad? Were you tied up with bureaucracy? Did you have the advantage of having partners? How did you find that?
So, a little precursor to that, as Josiane mentioned, I know they had a campaign planned. They were planning to break a campaign just before the lockdown hit. Well, we were in a pretty similar situation. We were meant to be breaking our pre-Ramadan campaign, which is really about a month before Ramadan actually begins, is the peak purchase period for the home category, and as you could probably assume, it's quite a big period from a business point of view. And we were just about
time of year, or is it
Sorry?
Is it your busiest time of year, or is it one of your busiest?
Easily one of the busiest.
Okay.
Easily one of the busiest. And we had everything ready to go, and we had to scale back. This was going to be one of our largest Ramadan campaigns that we'd planned for. And, obviously we had to scale back enormously. So I think having the kind of partners that we do, we have some pretty long-standing relationships, some of them new, but I think it really helped having the kind of partners that we did. It was very, very collaborative. They helped us renegotiate. They helped us sort of re-strategize. I think given that it was such a difficult time and it was very difficult to predict what was going to happen the next day, it was good to sort of be in it together, really. And I think everybody really understood and pulled together in terms of it was not really opportunistic. We will see what we can park, as Fadi mentioned, come back to it. But that was really the spirit it was taken in. So that definitely helped.
That's quite reassuring. Where does out of home sit in your media mix at the moment? How much of your spend, if I can ask, is dedicated to out of home, and is that going up? Is it going down? And how did it sort of change? I'm guessing I guess it dipped a bit during lockdown, but has it gone up or down during the rest of COVID? Where does it sit now, and how is it changing? I'll stick with you. Yeah.
All right. Well, yes, it definitely did go down during COVID. It didn't. It wasn't completely out of the picture. It was still part of the mix in some of our markets. But since lockdown ended, I think safe to say in the last 2 or 3 months, we have seen it steadily climb back up. And I would say today it's anywhere between 30 to 35% of our media mix. And I think we'd like to keep it there as far as possible.
Interesting. Okay. Josiane, is yours? How about yours? Again, you weren't huge on outdoor before, so you must have. Has your media mix changed? And is it where you want it to be, or how do you see that changing?
Definitely 2020 has been big for us in terms of offline spend. Even though we were expecting to spend earlier in the year, then we had to completely push it to H2. But in terms of the spend we have so far, it's definitely higher as a percentage compared to last year. And we see offline more as part of our media mix. It's part of the cross-channel strategy that we want to do, where it amplifies and supports in the other marketing channels that we have. We do have a very strong presence on digital, whether it is performance marketing or be it more social media. We also have the offline element, be it the TV, not just in outdoors, but also there's TV, there's radio, and there are also activations. So we try to maintain a healthy media mix, focusing on the short term, which is more on the performance related, and more on the brand building, which can also be done via out of home.
Fadi, you've got again, do you think is Sid's 35% about, is that a good sort of benchmark for across all sorts of categories, or does it really depend on categories? Or, you know, and also what's the role of, Sid's spoken about his two-pronged approach about the sort of brand building big things and then the more tactical smaller things. And I think, you know, is that how, first of all, what's the sort of, where does out of home fit sort of percentage-wise into the mix of general categories? And secondly, where does it fit into the sort of strategic mix? Or,
I mean,
you know,
before giving sort of a blanket number across all categories, I think, and even before talking about categories, I think it all starts off with measurement. It really depends on how the business is set up to make sure that you are ready to capture and analyze data coming in from outdoor, and what kind of data is coming in from outdoor. I think because I think historically outdoor has always been that unsung hero when it comes to the media mix. You know, every marketeer, I think, knows it in their gut that it works, but it's very hard for them to stand up and present it in front of, you know, CMOs or CEOs in some cases. And I think as time and data has become a lot more prevalent, it's become easier to justify. So if we look at specific cases like when you're able to launch an outdoor campaign and see its direct footfall impact on a store, right? We've done a lot of this analysis with QSRs because it's a lot easier, because, you know, you launch an LTO on outdoor.
LTO, sorry?
Sorry?
LTO? Sorry, excuse me.
Sorry, a limited time offer. Like
Okay,
if you launch a specific promotion or an offer,
yep,
outdoor has the fastest impact to in-store sales. Why? Because it does not take as long as TV or digital to build the reach, right? Because outdoor gets installed instantaneously or overnight, you know, across locations.
How do you know that? By measuring the footfall in the stores. That's how you. That's how you measure.
So think of it this way: if you launch a campaign like a specific offer, and you're launching on outdoor, TV, radio, and digital, you automatically see a spike the day the outdoor comes on, because it's the first media to build reach very quickly, right? Because it gets installed across the entire city. So while TV and digital, you need to generate the GRPs and get the reach, which could take around a week or 10 days, again, depending on the levels, etc. And the same thing with digital. The number of impressions need to build over time. And I think when you have that level of sort of measurability onto the actual business, you could start to justify the investment on outdoor. The second would be really making measurement fun and looking at mobile device IDs, right? And where they're passing. And if you're able to then sort of tie that back into in-store or to online. And same with promo codes, right? Having specific promo codes on outdoor that then tell you that somebody saw that outdoor location. So if you have a promo code on Sheikh Zayed that is different that is on Jumeirah Road, you can actually start to segment and say, oh, this guy used this specific code, and that code is only available on Sheikh Zayed and not on Jumeirah, right? So I would start off with measurement, because then you'd be able to move into the proper sort of media mix and saying, this is the justifiable amount for outdoor, because the level of spend might seem expensive, but if the ROI is high on your overall business, you could start to justify that and say that 35% makes perfect sense.
Josiane, are you measuring the effect of outdoor, or are you going with the gut instinct that Fadi spoke about, the unsung hero? How much are you measuring? How much are you going because you know it works?
I would definitely second Fadi's point, because if you are able to measure, even though how you attribute outdoor will always be a bit of a fuzzy logic, just because of it's not a direct correlation that you can do, similar to performance marketing, where you can do a last click attribution, for example. But in the sense of outdoor, there are some trackers that can support you. And us being an online business, that could be an increased web traffic, that could be an increase. If it is an LTO, or let's say an offer, definitely you'll be able to see results, whether in terms of increase of orders or new users, depending on what is the offer you are doing. The only problem would become more if it is more for brand. And this is where you will need more of brand health trackers in place, because ideally when you're going for brand positioning, you are targeting your top funnel, which means top of mind awareness, unaided awareness. It's less on the lower funnel conversion. So this is where you need to start differentiating between what is the messaging, then what would be a related way of maybe tracking it somehow, having some kind of research, having some kind of regular surveys to be able to understand the evolution of your top of mind, and how does that compare in terms of, let's say, the benchmark of the market or similar players in your industry, and that can help you to do some level of attribution in addition to more measurable metrics such as traffic, increase of orders, or new users, depending on the type of the content or the visual.
And again, I'll go to you, Sid. Yeah, and because this is, and I'll come back to your two-pronged approach again. Can you measure both of those prongs as easily, or do you have to do, presumably the tactical, store-driven, heat-mapped one is much more measurable than the brand one? Can you measure one prong and not the other, or are you able to measure them both to a certain extent? And how do you do that?
So, but before I answer your question, Austyn, I think when I say 30 to 35% of our media mix is outdoor, that also correlates to how expensive outdoor is. So it tends to come in at a higher percentage because of that as well. And that does differ from market to market, as Fadi and Josiana mentioned. I mean, based on the maturity of the market and the level of competition, obviously outdoor costs quite different across the region. However, that said, if I go to the two-pronged approach, yes, the tactical initiatives, the approach with more catchment-driven, initiatives is definitely a little more measurable. But again, it's really based on footfall data, which is the only real level of attribution that we can get. With the more brand-related stuff, we haven't been able to measure it as effectively, but we are embarking on a brand health tracker. So hopefully over the next year or so.
How does a brand health tracker work? Is that interview based? Is that a sort of survey based?
Yes, okay. It's survey based, and obviously it's an ongoing tracker where you can pull out information, pretty valid information every quarter. So within the next year or so, I think we should be able to get a little better understanding on how our other formats on outdoor should be performing, how it helps on brand lift, so on and so forth.
And quickly, do you have the do you see the same sort of spike as soon as you put up new outdoor ads? Does it lead to that boost in that immediate boost in traffic? Do you have experience?
I don't know. Let me approach that a little differently. In the past, if we've not taken certain outdoor sites for certain promotions that we run, I think we've seen a decline. So it may not be as immediate. I mean, it's tough to say which one works faster for us, because usually our tactical campaigns pretty much go live all together across channels. But as Fadi mentioned, of course, outdoors got a much quicker uptake, just because once it's up and people are looking at it. So that said, the other aspect we're looking at from a measurability point of view is we're also trying our hand at some level of a media mix modeling project. So we'll see. There's a bit of a predictive model being developed in-house as well. Very, very nascent right now, but we'll see how that pans out.
When are you going to try and roll that out? That sounds like would be interesting. When will you start to have effect? And also, how does a media mix modeling thing work in layman's terms?
It's laborious because you need a lot of quality data for at least 2 or 3 years. A lot of like-for-like comparison.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's been the biggest challenge for us in terms of looking at a media mix modeling program. But our tech department for the group in-house is really looking at some sort of a very nascent predictive AI model. Like I said, it's really nascent. I don't think where you could really gauge the level of accuracy yet. But hopefully in the next 6 to 8 months, we should be able to see if that can help us in some way.
Excellent. Now, we're running out of time, so I'm going to quickly ask you how you see your out-of-home strategy evolving in 2021, and then we'll have time for just a couple of questions. So Josiane, I'll go to you first, because you're fairly new to not new to the out-of-home market, but you're definitely on an out-of-home kick at the moment. How do you see that changing next year? What have you learned from this year? What are you going to change? What are you not going to change?
So we're definitely maintaining out-of-home as part of the media mix. Also, as Sid mentioned, we are working also on our end on a media mix modeling. Also, with the scale comes, the ability to understand more what helps, how you need to become more efficient, and how you need to optimize. But definitely, offline is part of our cross-channel strategy. In some markets, it will have higher level of investment. In other markets, it will be part of the media mix, but with a presence. But it definitely depends on the level of maturity of the market. Where are we, and how do we see that from a growth perspective of educating and bringing the users to the online adoption?
And Sid, what do you see for next year? What do you see changing in your out-of-home strategy?
I think more consistency. That's really where we'd like to be. Just a lot more consistent presence. I think that.
What do you mean
by
more
mentioned
consistent presence? What do you mean by that?
And again, goes back to the two-pronged approach. I think on brand, on top mind awareness, the top of the funnel stuff. Really, I don't think we've been as consistent as we'd like to be in the last 3 to 4 years. And I think that's really strategically where we're looking to move into, a space we're looking to move into across most of our markets.
And Fadi, what do you see as a sort of, among your clients and in the general market, what trends do you think we're likely to see in the out-of-home market?
I think primarily we're going to see a lot more measurability on outdoor. I think agencies and media vendors are working closely together in trying different things, whether it's going to be mobile device IDs that solves it, or location tracking, or programmatic outdoor. One of these is got to work, and it's got to work fast. I think the COVID situation has given everyone an opportunity to relook at, how everything works. Another thing that I think is super important when it comes to outdoor strategy is to stop thinking of it in silo, and to really start working on tying things together and integrating things. I know, both Sid and Josephine said, talked about media mix modeling, and it's and how annoying it might be to make sure that the data is clean and collected correctly. But there's no better time to do that than now, right? Because on the long run, from what we've seen, is the more the more data you're able to put into them, the better the results, the more accurate they are, and they can start moving into that predictive nature that Sid was talking about, and really about breaking down the silos, integrating things together, and maybe even going as far as some of the other tech platforms like Snapchat talk about AR with outdoor, right? So you could be using a specific augmented reality to purchase something online. So I think we're going to see a lot more improvement in the out-of-home space, probably starting in the first.
I think if I am also to add something that you also did in one of our markets is connecting different channels. So influencer marketing, you can bring those influencers as part of your outdoor creative, and that can also be part of a well-integrated campaign that could be cross-channel. So also we need to start thinking of outdoor, not just a creative that stands out there and potentially is not well interlinked to all your campaign, rather how you can take different elements from other channels and integrate them as part of OOH, and that can create a good narrative whereby you are tapping into more than one medium or one channel.
Great. Well, thanks a lot. Are there any questions from the audience? We had one question that pertained to the use of outdoor for performance and how you measure it. And I think that we've actually just spent the last at least 10 minutes answering that pretty thoroughly. So I might miss that one. Oh, here's a question from somebody affectionately known as Anonymous Attendee. Which type of out-of-home format do you feel has the most impact on your campaigns? And is size or frequency more effective? Oh, that's a great question. Sid, I'm going to throw you under the bus for this one. What format works best for you, and does size matter? Is size or frequency more important?
So it depends on what kind of campaign and what the objective of the campaigns are. If I had to look at it,
let's say footfall. I'm going to answer on behalf of this person. I want more people to come into I want to actually see sales, not brand awareness, actual sales, which is
okay. So I think frequency over size, for sure. And I think it goes back to if you're a retail brand, just brick and mortar, or your omni-channel, I think locations and knowing what catchments you really want to target make a big difference.
Okay, and when would you then, and then I'll flip it around, when would you get rid of the frequency, and instead of getting all your lampposts, when would you take all that budget and blow it on a great big billboard? What would that do for you?
It's a little bit more of a thematic campaign. So if, again, it all boils down to the objectives of the campaign. I'm not saying those campaigns wouldn't want us to drive footfall, but in most of our markets, the way we're seeing consumer sentiment, promotions really drive the footfall. You know, if it's a level of newness of product or a new trend breaking and stuff like that, that's still pushing a lot more awareness. So I think visual impact, size definitely does help in cases like that. But then location is that much more important because you're taking a big portion of your budgets, putting it on one sort of really key location.
Oh, that's that's the third prong, isn't it? You've got size, frequency, and location. Yeah. Josiane, what are there any points that you disagree with Sid's experience there, that it's different for your, for your products?
No, I think definitely frequency, especially when you're trying to create a bigger impact or a faster impact, and it's more transactional. So whenever it's a product related or more of an offer related, it's definitely more the frequency and the spread, where then you can distribute your budget over either more time period or more lampposts, let's say, versus one big format on Sheikh Zayed that can just blow your budget, which is really good in terms of positioning, but potentially not in terms of creating that very fast impact and seeing the sales.
Fadi, I'm going to go to you and sort of for a broader thing. Is this different for any other categories? Again, we've got two categories here that are not exactly small ticket in the terms of Sid's category, but certainly it's more affordable than, let's say, automotive, holidays, and real estate. Would those perhaps benefit more from bigger billboards?
I think at the end of the day, it's the same thing that I'm just echoing what my colleagues here are saying. So it's the same thing. It depends on the objective. If it's promotion led, if it's a call to action, it's frequency. If it's brand building, I think I agree that the bigger formats tend to perform better on brand, but I would also just bring in what is sort of either the virality or the buzz or the story you're trying to create with them, right? Like we all saw that baby reveal on Sheikh Zayed, right? That's perfect example of virality done right using outdoor. Again, I disagree with it. I'm not saying it was.
I think we all do, but yes, well, maybe not.
But still, everyone heard about it. It created, whether the right or wrong noise, it created noise. And again, it's just, how do you use, these kind of mediums to create the impact you want for your business? And that's where the messaging really plays a very big role.
Now, I've got one more question here, which is about measurement again. So I'm going to slightly sort of paraphrase it. And how do sort of media agencies, outdoor owners, and advertisers work together to help? Is measurement something you can do in a bubble? Both Sid and Josiane are doing media mix measurements. You're doing your own thing. Fadi, you're massively data-led. You're taking a lot of data. How much sort of buy-in do you need from other partners, and how much does that happen? Will that happen? Won't that happen? What's what's the sort of, how much do you need other people to measure for measurability? How much will it help, and is that going to happen? Sort of who's talking to one another? So
I mean, if I can just say one thing on that, I think first of all, there's a lot of merit in creating that sort of a holistic approach into measurement, or at least like the methodology of measurement. And I think there's a lot of newly launched, industry bodies that I think will tackle this, whether it be at the IAB or the AGB, or there's so many different ones. But I think it all will have to start with the industry in general working together to grow the pie and not to fight over the same pie. And I think that's been one of the biggest hindrances, whether be it in outdoor or anything else. It's the intention to grow rather than to compete.
Do you, again, Sid, do you find that you're sort of working with agencies and other partners to help with measurement, or are you doing it mainly internally?
A little bit of both. Not so much on out of home yet, but I think when it comes to digital, so we have quite a robust loyalty program in Shukran across the markets. So there's a lot of data that we sit on. We do need some certain external partners to help us crunch through that data. I think our digital agencies work with us quite seamlessly to ensure that we can measure ROAS even on brick and mortar through digital campaigns. We're hoping we should be able to do that with the out of home sometime soon. If I've got to take what Fadi's going to say, we're really hoping we can see some innovation come through in out of home pretty soon.
It does sound like it, and I'll go to you finally, Josiane, to say, do you find much the same thing?
I think a lot of data measurement is done in-house for Talabat, not particularly for outdoors, but for most of the channels. When it comes to outdoor, definitely having a collaboration, three-way collaboration will help, especially as the business or the industry matures more. We're still a bit far from where are we from programmatic outdoors, and with that it becomes more, it supports whether the advertisers as well as the supply side of having more customizable message, better data attribution. So there's also a lot of contribution that can be done from a demand and supply to be able to shape up the industry and progress it.
Great. Now I've got various other questions coming in, but I think we're going to have to wrap up now. I'll tell you what, we got time for a quick question that's come in from about 3 people on Facebook, apparently, which is, where do you see digital screen, what do you see digital screens replacing, what would they be called, static ones in the near future, or is there a place for both? Fadi, I'll go to you first. Is outdoor going to go entirely digital, or what's the?
No, I think obviously there's a lot of merit for digital screens, and we will see a lot more of them. If you look at other markets, if you focus on markets like the US, the UK, Germany, France, the first digital screens that change are in high pedestrian areas, right? That's where most of them are, because that's where most of the attention is. So I would expect more digital screens in malls, in areas where areas like City Walk,
Yep.
These outdoor experiential areas is, I think, where it's important, and that's where you'll start probably seeing most of the programmatic outdoor, because you're able to pull in that mobile device data coming in from around that area specifically. So I think that's probably where we'll see it first. On smaller formats of higher frequency, I think I honestly don't see the need for digital screens on these kind of formats just yet. It doesn't justify the level of investment for media vendors unless marketeers are willing to pay 150% extra premium for these things, which I really doubt anyone's in the appetite to do that yet. So yeah, I think we will see more of them. It's just where and what kind of technology is being used.
Josiane, where would you pay more for a digital screen, and where would you rather keep your costs down and go with a traditional static one?
So we do have some countries where we are using digital screens. They're good because you also have, let's say, longer creatives that can support in giving a bit of narrative, or can more distribute the message. And as Fadi said, if it has also high eyeballs or pedestrians, that can also increase the call to action and the impact. However, I see it more complementing and not, not canceling or not completely removing traditional, let's say, lampposts. You still need frequency in some areas. While you are driving on Sheikh Zayed, you will not be able to, see the digital screens. You need more of static screens. So it will depend on the focus, it will depend on what type of audience, and it will depend on which medium is best for you to go, either traditional or to go digital, but they should be complementing.
Sid, do you agree, or do you see that even on Shakeside Road? Because I'm thinking there might be some opportunities for maybe digital screens that change by day. You might get a cheaper rate for your lampposts on Shakeside Road if you only have them for an hour of every day and share it with others. Would that be a use of digital screens, or where and how do you use digital, and where do you see it not working and not working?
So I think digital, again, if and when they do come around on costs, digital can be helpful given the kind of technology you have today, the kind of screens that we've seen at City Walk. They have great impact, even in the daytime. So the LED technology is right up there. I think it is flexible in terms of serving even content to people or consumers. You can choose time of day. I think there are some interesting brands in the region that have done, a network of digital screens to serve content specifically relevant to the time of day as well.
Yep.
But I think where digital fails in a high traffic area, if it's not pedestrian, is if you've got a roster of a few brands and you then don't have enough stay on each brand, and that's not conducive if you're on a highway, for instance. So I completely agree with Fadi and Josiane. I think high pedestrian areas, definitely digital screens make sense. For other areas, as a technology, digital would work, but I think how they work the roster would have to be very different.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I think we're going to have to wrap up now. We could keep going for hours. We're already 10 minutes over, but I've done worse. And so thanks a lot. We've had a lot of really interesting things here. We've looked at some of the challenges, some of which involve measurements and proof points. We've looked at some of the sort of strategies that I think Sid's 2-point strategy is a sort of an easy one to say, but actually has a lot of nuances there that you're looking, it affects the size, it affects frequency, it affects this sort of triumvirate of size, frequency, and location and what they do. We've looked at Josiane's sort of experiences of altering things fast over the last year and sort of where that's going to take us. There's an awful lot to take away from here. So we're going to have to wrap it up now, but thank you very much first of all, thank you very much to our sponsors, to Arabian Outdoor. That, by the way, is the official out-of-home arm of Shwari Group, which has served as pioneering and market-leading force in UAE's outdoor advertising market since 1995. You'll know them from a lot of prime locations around Dubai. And thanks, guys, to our panelists. Thanks, Fadi Maktavi from Hearts and Science. Thank you, Sid Siva Prakash from Home Centre, part of Landmark Group.
Thanks, Austyn.
And thanks, Josiane Assad from Talabat. I know that everybody's going to be looking at noticing your billboards a lot more, and probably looking at them in a different way. As I say, I think that outdoor advertising is the oldest form of advertising, but it's still one of the most. So it's definitely, I find it intriguing. And I've been Austyn Allison, the editor of Campaign Middle East. You can find all of us on various places on social media, our corporate websites, and in the pages of Campaign Middle East and at campaignme.com. I think certainly I'm trying to twist everybody's arms into writing for me a bit more. Fadi's been writing away, but I'll definitely be getting in touch with Sid and Josiane to pen some articles for me. So thanks, and you'll see us on a billboard near you. Thank you very much to the team at Motivate and elsewhere behind the scenes for making all this happen, and thanks to the audience, for joining us. Stay safe, everybody, and thanks a lot, and I'll see you at the next one. Excellent.
Thank you, Austyn.
Thanks, Josiane.
Thanks, Josiane. Thanks, Fadi.
Bye.